Welcome to this lecture where I want to cover what some of the biggest apps are doing in terms of colour. I want to start strong with one of the biggest trends, a monochromatic colour scheme. Loads of apps are using this approach because it's a surefire way of checking off multiple goals through one move. The CVS app is one of the best examples. Their brand colour floods through and it's unmistakable. Is it too much? Yep, but that can be debated. What interests me is from a designer's perspective. I'd hate to work on such a project. Check out the shortcuts because red is overflowing. You have little to work with. We can see a dark shade of blue and some weird light colour that doesn't fit anything. That's what happens when you put yourself into a corner. My advice is you stay away from this approach. Sure, use the company's colour, but don't go overboard with it. Moving on, Viber is based on purple and a touch of teal here and there, but I'd still include it in this category because you'd have no hesitation to call out the main colour if someone asked you to. Considering this is a chat app that you could potentially use for hours on end, I appreciate the subdued feel. It's not all that modern, but it's still a nice look. Twitch is in the same boat, though their purple is much more saturated. This is the style I like. The same shade is used in the bottom panel and there are no deviations whatsoever. When you design apps that are heavily focused on content, you have to make the interface disappear. Users want to see videos, photos, live streams, so all your branding has to be minimal. Etsy is one of the best-looking apps in this lecture. The designer who made it was very smart. I appreciate the coloured left menu that packs a punch, but what's more interesting is the product details screen. Here, notice there are 3 variations for the calls to action. This is a clear representation of hierarchy. Add to cart is the most important button, and as such it gets the full body treatment. Buy it now, though great for business, is probably significantly less used. Finally, ask a question is placed somewhere in the top right. Compare this design with CVS and you'll see you get that much more freedom. Work smarter, not harder. The brand's colour still shines through, but it's not overwhelming, and that's the key. IKEA recently updated its app and it's all about white space. Just have a look at these armchairs. You could have squeezed in at least one more full item, yet they decided not to. That's a throwback to Deliveroo, which had a similar strategy. But going back to the colour scheme, it's all about their specific blue and a dash of yellow here and there. They do make use of other colours to show product availability, new items, sales and so on, so that tells you don't have to be bound by the company's colours. I know you've seen enough, but I've got 2 more apps that heavily rely on colour. TED Talks is a beautiful app that's well designed and beautifully executed. It isn't in the CVS pit, even though red is seen in every screen. One thing that stands out is the Watch Now button in this home screen. Notice they didn't use a white solid button nor a button based on a stroke. Instead, they used a red shade that would show it off as the preferred action but not give it too much importance. Again, this is a potential trap for beginner designers. If the brand's colour is one specific shade of blue, do you have the liberty to mix it up? And how can you stay on that one colour and still have a well-established hierarchy? Well, you have to resort to tricks like this. Whether you use a darker shade, you underline the button, or you place it in a different position. These are all things that you have to master. Let's change things up a bit. Still monochromatic, but this time we're looking at an inverted contrast. Audible's sleek interface is one of my favourites. I use the app around the clock and I appreciate its dark look. Though orange is what hits you first, when you start to analyse things, you'll notice how much the app is based around grey. Various dark shades for the background items, but also light values for the text. Pure white is used sparingly. But even though I'm praising it, you should know it's very hard to pull off this type of design. Even though it's only about an 8.5 in my book, it's still hard as hell to design something similar. Just take the linear icons, either from the action bar or the bottom panel. These tend to look fuzzy and low quality just because of the inverted colour scheme. Just so you better understand how easy it is to screw up an inverted design, let's take a look at UPS's app. Here, the feeling I'm getting is dark and cumbersome. That's funny to say considering Audible is clearly darker. The problem I'm having is with regards to contrast and spacing. The text in the Manage tab is too crowded. Line height was probably left on auto and that's an instant mood killer. Furthermore, there's too much white. If they'd used it intelligently, maybe this would have been another story, but as it stands, it's bothering my eyes. That's the complete opposite of what Audible did. They understood pure white text on a dark background is fine as long as it's in small doses. But as I was making this lecture, they released an updated look where they came back to a regular colour scheme. I dare say this is even more crowded than before. Plus, for whatever reason, they decided to use simpler icons in this menu. At the end of the day, huge company, mediocre design. All these apps were based around one colour. The next type of colour scheme is based on two different ones, usually opposites in the colour wheel. Ryanair is strong on yellow and blue. Though that's a perfectly reasonable combination, what drags it down is the muddy shadows. This makes it feel sloppy. Whether the coder didn't spend enough time on it or the designer didn't want to soften it up, the result is an outdated feel. Next on my list is iHerb, a gorgeous colour scheme based on green and orange. Though this is not as common as other combos, this is very well executed and in tune with the company's vibe. I've been using their site for a number of years and I've seen how they've constantly adjusted their image. Notice the orange is reserved for just a few key actions. Add to cart, bestseller badge, filter, the number of items in your cart. Great stuff. Viator, on the other hand, is in the bad pile. Could you go wrong with orange and blue? Well, it would appear so. This app looks like it hasn't been updated in years, and that's because the colours are washed out. It's not the fact that they wanted a soft look, it's just a matter of using colours from a different period. In general, this is a bulletproof combination, but you have to get it right in the colour picker. Continuing down my list, we have a few apps that use 3 colours or more. Booking is one of them, yet I suspect they'll do a complete redesign in the near future. Booking's profits are huge, so they afforded one of the best designed teams out there, so this rainbow style was very well executed, and as such, it still looks okay. But I suspect that as they strip away parts of it, they'll end up with a much better look. My advice? Stay away from 3 or more colours. Finally, Foursquare shows us a neat coding trick that allows you to change the app's colour scheme based on the predominant colour in individual screens. Here you can see blue being used in the top region, but next to it we have an interesting shade of brown. Besides that, some type of grey. When you're an aggregator that shows off different types of brands, this is a smart way to go. Okay, let's sum this up. No matter your approach, big apps should be studied attentively, for the good and the bad. In general, you'll have 2 big directions. Either your project has a fixed colour scheme based on the company's existing branding, case where you have little to no freedom. Or you get unlimited say in the app's colour scheme, and if that happens, it's best you use these apps as a reference point, not colour wheels or complicated double complementary colour schemes which make you scratch your head. There are good inspiration sources out there besides checking out apps, and we'll discuss them in a separate lecture. I'll see you in a minute.